We're just about 2 weeks into Utah spring football. Who have been the early standouts? And Utah's Pro Day is coming up. So let's break it down on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. If this is your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments, and you can follow our show on X at Locked On Utes. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out today at NissanUSA.com. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined by former collegiate kicker Moose Bingham here with me to talk about some of the top spring ball standouts so far. And Moose, for me, I'm going to dive right into it. I got to go with Caleb Lomu. He's a guy that last year we didn't see a lot of, a high recruit coming in, a 4-star. And look, it takes offensive lineman time. Unless you're Spencer Fano and can become the starting left tackle, literally the hardest position you're starting for a team, a really good Utah team to at left tackle. Incredible what Fano was able to do last year. But Lomu now taking over that spot, I think, is big because Fano obviously in high school played a lot of right tackle too, so he might be a little more comfortable on that side too. So the fact that Lomu's already earned this spot, like heading into spring ball, and then just like him and continuing to get those reps there, I think it's outstanding.
Yeah, well, with Caleb Lomu, everyone's like, why isn't he starting? What's going on? He didn't go through spring ball last year. He came right into camp, and that's an issue where you're like, okay, we've got to let this kid get used to being a Utah football player, get used to the weight that he's going to get put on, and get used to Doug Ellis, who's going to come and just kick his trash up and down the field, where Fano had that opportunity in the spring. He got to go through it with the team. He got to memorize the playbook. He knew what was going on. And so Caleb Lomu was going at a disadvantage, but his ceiling is as high as the Empire State Building. Caleb Lomu is an absolute dog, and I love that he's playing left tackle. Spencer Fano can do either one of those positions. Hell, Spencer Fano can be playing center if we want him to. He can play guards. He is one of, like, you hear of 5-tool baseball players. Spencer Fano is a 5-tool O-lineman, and that's a rare find. But Caleb Lomu locking down that left side, Spencer Fano going on the right side. Those are some athletic bookend tackles that just almost brings a tier of beautiful athleticism to my eye for the next 2 to 3 years, hopefully.
It's going to be so exciting to see what they do together. And you touched on it a little bit there, but you played. You're so plugged into the recruiting game too. Can you just speak a little bit more? Because we're going to do this with Isaiah Garcia this year too, right? More than likely, barring something surprising, he's probably going to play the bench this year. Can you just illustrate even further how hard it is for freshman offensive linemen to come in and play right away?
Freshman offensive linemen, freshman anything. It's tough to do, especially when you're at a P4 program. We could see things when Utah was in the Mountain West or in the WAC where a freshman would come in and surprise people. Now, it's like, hey, you're not just competing against the guys that are currently on the roster. We're going to bring in some transfer portal guys, some graduate guys. Hey, you know how you thought you were going to be a starter last year? Here's a kid from Stanford. Congratulations. Here we go. But that's the beautiful thing about college football now. We're allowing kids to actually get some reps, but in non-consequential situations. When you have freshmen starting, that means you may have screwed up recruiting for the last 3 years, or you've seen guys that have gone on to the NFL sooner than you anticipated. So usually when that happens, you're like, oh crap, we were anticipating this kid for the next 2 years. He's gone now. Let's see what we can do to really right the ship so that we can go compete for a Big 12 championship.
Yeah, and Utah's putting themselves in positions now, in particular with the tackle depth, that feels like they're amassing with these recruits they've been able to bring on, especially with Fano and now Garcia recruiting the state so well. So I said Lomu is my standout. Moose, who's been yours so far?
There's so many standouts, but I'm going to go with Isaac Wilson. The fact we're already going into spring ball. He knows the playbook. He's already fighting for that number 2 position. And I'm surprised that Whittingham's sitting there and he's like, hey, I don't know who my number 2 is. Could be this freshman kid, could be the other kid. We don't know. I'm really excited about that. And I've loved the safety battle as well going on. So there's a couple of really interesting battles going on. The safeties, when we're sitting here, Nate Ritchie, that's a kid I adore because any safety that can kick a 60-yard field goal has my heart. Nate Ritchie, he could be the kicker for the Utah Utes. And Jonathan Hall has been doing pretty good. But Alakai Gilman, I'm excited to see him transferring in. And then let's not forget about Teo Johnson. We've got 4 safeties replacing the 2 that I'm excited to talk about later. But those 4 safety, it's nothing to gawk at, to smirk at. It's just, let's get down, let's get her done. And Scally always does a phenomenal job with the safety group.
Your point. I mean, it is just tremendous depth. Jonathan Hall and Ritchie look so good in the bowl game. Like it's no Sione Vaki, no Cole Bishop, and Utah only gives up 14 points in the game to Northwestern. Like it's unreal what those guys were able to do there. And you already mentioned you had a guy in Gilman too, and you get a guy in Teo Johnson who was anticipated to make the swap there. And the rave reviews for him have been off the charts too. So I am really excited to watch that battle continue to play out too. And we were just talking, you said it yourself, right? How hard it is for any freshman to come in and start. Wilson won't be able to do that because of Cam Rising, of course. But the fact that he's already pushing Brandon Rose and has old curmudgeony Kyle Whittingham raving about a freshman is a huge achievement. And it's so exciting to watch him come up to the hill. Sure, he's throwing a pick or two. So did Brandon Rose today as well. These guys are still feeling it out. It's early in spring ball, still taking chances too. And I mean, Moose, you can help me. I'm trying to remember the last time we saw a freshman quarterback Nate Johnson, came on, and he was in a package for Utah for his athleticism. But even he was a little buried more down on the depth chart versus Wilson's really got a shot this thing.
Yeah, I mean, the last freshman quarterback that's been number 2 in this situation is probably like Brian Johnson.
Oh, wow.
In all reality.
Yeah.
Like where it's like, hey, we've got a freshman dude here. And next year, he's going to be special. But we've got this guy. And it's really interesting listening to people about Cam Rising. We might as well just call him Bubble Boy at this situation. They're like, no one touch him. No one go around him because we need him safe and healthy. It reminded me of when I was kicking in high school. One kid accidentally dove and I tripped over him. And the coaches almost killed this poor kid, Walker Croxton. And I'm like, Croc, I'm so sorry. I'm just a klutz and I fell over. He's like, I know, but I'm going to be running until I die at this point. I'm like, yeah, it's because we don't have a backup. And I feel like that's the same thing with Cam. I mean, we've got a bad moon rising, but we've got to keep a bad moon healthy at this point because he's a stud. And if we can just dominate with him, we don't have to worry about the backup quarterback. And that's where I hope that it goes this next year.
I hope so too. I'm really excited to watch that play out of it. Before we completely move off of spring ball, I do just want to say, is there anything else that's really caught your eye that's intrigued you so far up on the hill?
You know what? I'm excited for the development of Snowden, to be honest.
Oh, yeah, Smith Snowden. Yep.
I really like Smith Snowden. He's a kid that I don't doubt ever. I think he's an absolute stud. And
another was good in the bowl game too, to your point. He looked really good in the bowl game.
And I'm excited to have Lander Barton back as well. New number, new attitude. Actually, it's the same old attitude. He's a mean wrecking machine that can't wait to retire to Montana one day. His brothers came into my office, and they're the funniest family. I remember interviewing Lander after a game, and I was like, where do you want to go to school? What do you want to do? He's like, I honestly don't care. I'm going to be in the NFL. I just can't wait to be on my farm in Montana with all my NFL earnings. And I'm like, Utah State? Like, want to go to Wyoming? He's like, nah, I'll probably end up at Utah. And I'm glad he has because he's a kid that's going to be a game changer for Utah this year and really surprise all these high-flying offenses in the Big 12. They're going to come to a screeching halt seeing a Morgan Scally defense and a Sharif Shaw defense and all of these other guys that are just amazing human beings that are great at recruiting.
They've done a great job. And, speaking of Lander, I got to tell the story, Moose. First high school football game that I had ever done play-by-play for. You were my analyst that game. It was the first time we ever worked together up at Brighton High School. Lander, I mean, I'm trying to remember the team they were playing now off the top of my head. I think it was Pleasant Grove. They were driving. Yep. Lander bats the ball up in the air, catches it, runs it back to the house, and stiff arm the quarterback on the same play. Like, that was my introduction to Lander Barton, and it's one I won't forget. That same season, there's a reason that Jim Harbaugh flew out to watch him play, right?
Yeah, I was laughing. So my brother-in-law, he was getting his number retired at Brighton, and this was Lander's sophomore year. I think we saw him in his junior year. And I have never laughed so hard because he's like, my brother-in-law, his name's Brian Keel, played at BYU, played in the NFL. And he's like, that kid right there is so much more talented than I was at that age that it's comical. We all just sat there and watched Lander during Brian's jersey retirement, and we were all just cracking up. We're like, this is a cheat code kid, and he's become a cheat code man at the University of Utah, saying, a Utah man I am, and we just should feel blessed as long as we get to watch Lander Barton donning the crimson and red, or crimson and teal, whatever, red and silver, whatever.
It worked. But no, you're no, but you are right. Like, there's some guys who just look different on a high school field. Absolutely one of them. And the Big 12, to your point, you also illustrated, is about to learn how different he is too. So really excited to see what Lander's going to do coming up here. And feels like not long from now, we'll be talking about him as a Pro Ute. Speaking of Pro Utes, want to talk about some of the Utes who have their Pro Day coming up here. And we are going to be breaking down how we expect them to perform at the Pro Day in one moment. But first, I want to talk to you all about our friends at Nissan. This week's March Madness bracket highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one of the teams that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest, just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs. These guys were able to take it to the next level. Just like the Oregon Ducks are obviously this week's Nissan Rogue. The team absolutely surprised us all with a powerful performance in the final Pac-12 tournament. Still feels weird to say. Punching their ticket to the big dance. They say they win life. Go Rogue. And that's exactly what the Ducks have done here. So you can take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Also want to talk to you all about another one of our sponsors at Locked On Utes today, our friends at FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's number one sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on the point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Speaking of cutting down the nets, Moose, in your bracket, who'd you pick to win it all?
I haven't quite gotten there. I'm not a basketball guy.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew it. I just wanted to believe that you would partake in all of us and do a bracket. Are you going to do one?
I will do one. My neighborhood's doing one, and I keep laughing because everyone keeps on pulling up like basketball stuff. I was with the head coach the other day, and he's like, who do you think the best basketball player is in the state? I'm like, I don't freaking know. I know football. I know the gridiron. I don't know the hardwood. They're like, why? I'm like, well, it's a tough situation for me. I went to basketball tryouts, and a coach hovered his hand over my head and said, Moose, you have to be this tall to try out for my basketball team. And since that moment, I said, I'm all in on football.
Hey, you made it out all right. You still made it out all right. It's a tough game. You got to have the height is definitely. It got me out of it too, and I know many others as well. But if you guys are interested in all the bracket action, unlike Moose, you can head over to FanDuel today. Moose, one thing I know you're interested in is talking about some of these Pro Utes. You teased it earlier. You were looking forward to talk about Sione Vaki and Cole Bishop. There's just a few of the Utes participating in the Pro Day coming up for the University of Utah, where they get an opportunity to continue to highlight and spotlight their talents. Vaki and Bishop are the first two. Jonah Elliss is going to be competing. It's going to be great to see him actually be able to compete. He was invited to the Combine, interviewed there, couldn't compete because of some injuries. Satao Laumea, Keaton Bills, other guys too. Devon Vele, Miles Battle, Thomas Yasmin, Emery Simmons rounding out the list of Utes competing at the Pro Day. How important are Pro Days in your opinion?
Pro Days are pretty interesting. They're extremely important if you didn't go to the NFL Combine. This is where you can put up a time, a bench, a whatever that's going to change your life, to be honest with you. A tenth of a second is the difference between millions of dollars for a lot of these guys. And what I mean by that is if you get taken in the 4th round versus the 6th round, there's a huge difference in pay, but that sets you up for that second contract. That's what we're all striving for. Because at the end of the day, football is pretty harsh. You have about 1 million kids in each age group that go to try to get to college. Those 1 million kids, about 10,000 make it. From those 10,000 in D1, about 250 get invited to the combine, to 300 depending on the year, and the same amount get drafted. Then about 350 make it to the NFL if we're talking about like free agents. And then from those guys, about 125 to 150, depending on the year, make it to the second contract. So we're talking about the best of the best of the best, sir. And the separation between those guys, it becomes very difficult. So I'm excited to see what these Utes can do. And they've already put up some measurables, if those are factual, that I'm excited to watch and excited to see.
It is going to be fun to watch and fun to see. And, you know, we could talk about Cole Bishop, Sione Vaki, all those guys, and maybe we will in a moment. But you said it yourself, it's biggest for the guys who didn't get the chance at the combine. I think Jonah Elliss has a really good chance to be potentially even the first Ute drafted. How big is this for him?
So Jonah Elliss, it's not really about his physical abilities. It's about his ability to be there. You need to just be available. And so he doesn't have to run like a 4.5. But if he runs, if he gets medically cleared, that's what we're looking at, because his film has said more than anything else up to this point, and we don't need to see much. Kind of like Jackson Powers Johnson, a former high school All-American at Oregon. He played 1 day at the Senior Bowl, and they said that 1 day was enough that they packed him up and sent him home because he put the film on tape that they're like, we don't need to see anything else. And if Elliss can just come out, do well, but stay healthy, that's all that we care about with him at this point, because his film and his legacy of work at Utah is so impressive.
It is incredibly impressive, and I can't wait to see which NFL team gets his services. I feel like he's going to be a big day one contributor. And before we even started this show, off the camera, you said one guy that you're really excited about is the opportunity is Miles Battle.
Yeah. If you're not going in the first 4 rounds, you were really looking at special teams at that point. Miles Battle, 6'4", 205. Can you imagine that running down on kickoff? It's like, oh my goodness, run out the way. Can you imagine him on punt? He's a guy that can block. He can do so many good things, and he can be a special teams ace in the NFL for years and years and years, and maybe cut himself a little niche starting in a nickel package because he could play in the box and then start moving to the outside, maybe playing a boundary corner and really doing what he needs to do, because he's a kid that could make a huge difference for a team with his skill set. That's what you're looking for in those later rounds. What can this kid do, and how can we maximize his value for our team? Because you're just getting a bunch of chess pieces. You're not going to have all queens out there. You're going to have some pawns, and they better be able to do something good for your team at the next level.
Speaking of doing something good for your team at the next level, let's talk about the big names now. Sione Vaki, Cole Bishop turned heads at the combine. We know what Tawalau what he can continue to do as well. Keaton Bills is another guy continuing to try to up his stock, as is Devon Vele. What are you expecting to see out of them? I mean, Cole Bishop, I'm not sure we're going to see him run a 40 after what he did at the combine, when he did do really well in that one too. But is there anything those guys can do to still elevate their stock at the pro day?
So Cole Bishop doesn't need to do anything. Let's start with him. And he's kind of funny because my old teammate Jake Murphy was raving about him in Georgia. He lives down in the Atlanta area now. He's like, we got a Ute coming in. And I'm like, what are you talking about? There's no Ute that's coming here. And then we saw Cole Bishop and what he did and who he was and the person he was. And Cole Bishop has put up some great film, but his major question mark was the 40. They're like, how fast is this kid? And my goodness gracious, they're like, has he been sandbagging it this whole time or what? And it's like, no, he's played assignment sound football, played into what Utah does, and he's done a great job. And I think Cole Bishop, he could hear his name called pretty early in the 3rd round, maybe high 2nd round. I think there's going to be a few teams that just fall in love with this kid.
I think so too. I'm really excited to see about his NFL future, and they'll have the opportunity to raise their stock coming up here. The Utah Pro Day rapidly approaching. As we mentioned, the Pro Day is going to be coming to us live I believe this Thursday, as it will be held before ahead of the NFL draft, April 25th through the 27th. So it'll be fun to see how those guys can perform. And yes, it is officially this Thursday. So going to talk about how their potential performances there could affect their draft stock by talking about where it currently is a month and about 2 weeks out of the NFL draft. Want to dive into all of that with all of you in one moment. But first, want to talk to you all about our friends at Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games or to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug in your existing TV that provides access to the millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether you're into the opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have your Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from all your sports bands, all for free. And that includes all of us at the Locked On Network and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels lets you dive into all the games, analysis, highlights, and more. And you can keep up to date on all the latest in the worlds of sports with March Madness, NBA, MLB, and so much more. And that's without even mentioning all the great news channels, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos, all available too. So check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this one. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Also want to tell all of you about another sponsor of our episode of Locked On Utes, our friends at UCCU. Here's some exciting news. UCCU has just elevated their checking accounts by enhancing them with more benefits, more savings, and more online protections than ever before. A lot more paired with the most advanced and comprehensive mobile banking tools. Elevated Checking is a must-have financial product packed with lifestyle, security, and financial benefits. The lifestyle benefits alone include cell phone protections, roadside assistance, telehealth with 24/7 access to licensed health professionals with zero copay, and exclusive savings on travel, shopping, and dining. And Elevated Checking is free when you do any one of the following. Use your debit or credit card 15 times or more a month and make a monthly direct deposit of $500 or more and maintain an average daily balance of $1,500. Otherwise, UCCU Elevated Checking is only $6 a month. Visit UCCU to open an Elevated Checking account online or stop by any branch to open an account. UCCU, love where you bank. All right, Moose, when talking about these guys as draft stock, I want to classify them by talking about if these guys we think are going to go on day 2, day 3, or undrafted, where they fit in at the moment. And I'm curious if we have the same guys. Who do you think has a chance to be selected day 2? I feel like there's 2 guys that have a shot, but I'm curious what you think.
You think there's 2? Well, I think there could be 4, to be honest with you.
I like it. Okay.
I mean, like, honestly, we talked a lot about Cole Bishop. There's going to be a team that falls in love with him. Sione Vaki, I've had people tell me that there's multiple teams coming here just for him for the pro day, and they're taking him to dinner. I can't say the teams, but there's a few teams that I'm ecstatic if he becomes there. And you know what? Jonah Elliss, if he clears the health, he's going to be high. I mean, on the big boards, Mel Kiper has him at 6. PFF has him at 8 for his position. That's very high for those guys. And then, Satoa Luomia, and I'm butchering his name. I always do. I'm so sorry.
Oh, man, you're good.
But you know what? He's number 7 on Mel Kiper's at his position and number 17 on PFF. He's a guy that's big. He did so good in the Senior Bowl. He's done a lot of good things to really increase his draft stock, where he's going to show up a lot of different places. And Utah has had a proven track record. And if you take a Utah guy, he's going to do great in your organization, and he's going to make you look real good. So there's that goes in their favor as well.
I love everything you said there. And I think a lot of those guys deserve to be drafted in the range. The 2 I was referring to at the moment are Bishop and Ellis. I feel like Vaki, just in the combine season, I really like Sione Vaki. I would love to have him on my NFL team. Minnesota Vikings, if you're watching this, please make sure you're one of those teams that Moose is referring to take out to dinner. I have no idea if they are involved in that, but that's just a secret hope that I have because I'm a big fan of his game. I worry his height is going to knock him a little bit. And Laumea is another guy. I think there is a desire to have strong NFL offensive linemen, but I just wonder if he's not going to get knocked a little bit because he is a guard rather than the premium on tackles too. We just saw what maybe the NFL thinks of this guard class as a whole, but how much money they dished out in NFL free agency too. So that's where I think Vaki and him, maybe 4 rounders and behind. I'd love to be wrong, and that's just how I feel on it right now. As for the other guys, we kind of highlighted all the guys that we feel strongly will get drafted. Those 4 guys, right? But we didn't mention Keaton Bills, Devon Vele. You already mentioned your guy, Miles Battle there. I'll just throw in, I just love taking a chance on guys with traits. Thomas Yasmin has those in spades. Where do you see their draft stock currently?
So all of these guys, I mean, let's break them down one by one. Keaton Bills, he's a kid that played defensive line in high school. He's a kid that's developed into an offensive lineman, and not a decent one. He's a heck of one. He's a little bit older. It's kind of interesting that him and I keep coming back to Jackson Powers Johnson, but they're in the same draft class, but they never played high school together.
Wild.
That is one of the craziest stats I've heard. They were never on the same high school team freshman to senior year. And that's crazy. I recruited Keaton Bills. I didn't do a good enough job, but he's a kid that he's just kind of like gum on your shoe. He's going to stick around and he's going to show up on a practice squad. He's going to figure out a way, and he's smart. And I love Keaton. And I think he's a kid that's going to test pretty well tomorrow. He did get invited to the combine, and there's a reason, because over 2/3 of the team in the NFL are like, hey, this is a kid we want to see a little bit more of. And you're going to see a lot of teams at the pro day tomorrow because they're going to want to see even more of him. Keaton Bills is a kid that I think is going to get a free agent pickup or a late round draft pick because teams are putting a premium at offensive line, like you said. Devon Vele, I mean, he's a kid that I really, really like. The unfortunate thing is Utah never really has put a premium on wide receivers, and that's been hard. But what we have seen is when receivers do get into the league from Utah, they outperform their draft stock like you wouldn't believe. I mean, Steve Smith, what was he, 3rd round, and he became a perennial All-Pro. You see so many guys that go in there, and you're just like, can we run a spread for like a series? Give these guys a shot. And Devon Vele being 6'4", willing to do anything. I mean, his stats aren't eye-popping. He had under 60 yards a game, 3 touchdowns, and 43 receptions. But he's 6'4", 203. He's another kid that can run down on kickoff. He doesn't have an ego because he's coming out of the University of Utah. Then Thomas Yasmin, like you said, you're like, hey, he did have those 5 games, but he did have a season-ending injury, which killed him. 301 yards in 5 games is crazy, and 6 touchdowns. The production was there. The injury, you're just like, oh, no, you don't want to see that. But I've seen a lot of tight ends that have gotten over that and been very, very successful in the NFL after that. And then Emery Simons as well is going to be there. He's just kind of.
Yeah, he didn't. Yeah, I love Emery. I'd be shocked if he got any, like I said, even a free agent invite. I think will be curious for him. But how about Miles?
Yeah, Miles will definitely get. I think he'll get a late round look, if not getting invited and getting one of those high free agent checks, depending on who his NFL agent is and what's going on. Because Utah's done a good job with getting sometimes the highest checks for free agents. I mean, Lolo Tulele got one of the highest checks and had a spot in the Broncos before he retired. They're like, we want you here. We're just concerned you're going to retire. And he's like, concern valid. And just decided to hang him up. But he's a kid that I love, and I've known him since he was a young gun.
Yeah, it's a fun group. To your point, like Utah has a track record, a history. That's a valuable thing. How are the NFL teams going to view it? We can't wait to see how it plays out and see how these guys perform at the Pro Day coming up later today. Moose, thank you for joining us. Tell everyone what you got going on.
Oh, just created a course that helps parents understand the recruiting game called Recruiting for Parents. You guys, if you think your kid can make it to the next level, let's do everything we can to help them get there, and go to recruitingforparents.com. And you guys will have all the knowledge and all the resources at your fingertips to get your kid to the next level, who could be the next great Ute. You never know.
You never know. One thing we do know is you always do a great job whenever you join us here, Moose. So thank you again.
No problem. Have a great one.
That's going to do it for Locked On Utes today, but we'll be back with you tomorrow talking more things Utah football. We look forward to seeing you then.